And we are live. Welcome everyone. How are we doing? Happy Sunday. Welcome. 2 o'clock on the dot. Started here this Sunday in the bright sunny San Francisco today. I always like to get things as everybody is signing in, everybody's joining. I always like to shout out. Where's everybody from today? Where are you joining us from? If it's your first time here, if it's not your first time here, welcome back. It's really good to see you again. Thank you for joining us. As always, we have Bella here.
Hi.
Hi, Bella. Everyone says hi, right? All right, we'll give everyone a moment to sign in. We'll get everyone loaded, caught up, situated. Before we begin our pasta journey together today, we're making gnocchi, diving into the world of sweet potato gnocchi. This is one of my favorite dishes. I just did a version of this dish with a different pasta shape for a charity dinner in Chicago. I don't know if you saw that on my Instagram and my stories, but that was a lot of fun. This is a restaurant tasting menu worthy dish that we're all going to learn how to make today. I've done this once before. It might have been one of my favorite things I made in that year when I first taught this, but it's been a while since then, so it's good to revisit it. It's good to kind of like repurpose a lot of these techniques and get back into everything. Let's see, how are we all doing? Carol from LA, Nicole in Redmond, Washington. We got Chicago in the house, Thomas.
Chi-town.
Hello, Chi-town. Lexi Cal Jewel in Los Angeles. We got the Epicurean in Santa Barbara. That is in Santa Barbara. Look at that. Perfect. Let's see, who else? So is it better to use, Carol, right out of the gates with a question. Is it better to use a processor or a ricer? We'll talk about that. I'm going to use a food processor for two reasons. I have two different bowls in mine. And so I can use the little bowl for chopping my veggies, and then I can use the big bowl for processing all of my sweet potatoes, rather than having to get out my ricer. Now, if you don't have a food processor, or you only have a ricer, or you don't have a ricer, you have options. I wouldn't say one is better than the other. It's just a lot of times it matters what you have in front of you, what you need to pull out from maybe your kitchen storage area where all of your gadgets are kept. But in the case of sweet potato gnocchi, and we'll kind of get into this as we dive into things, you have options. You're not kind of limited where you wouldn't want to use your food processor for a regular potato. And like I said, we'll talk about all that when we get into it, but good question right out of the gates. As always, speaking of questions, that's what Bella's here for. She's doing the behind the scenes, all the logistics, and also handling our little chat room we have going on right over here, right? So if you have any questions throughout this entire class, please drop them into the chat. It's interactive. That's what I'm here for. So I'm here to answer questions, whether it be about the recipe, what we're doing, what we're working on, food, topics, culinary, restaurants, whatever it may be. We're here to talk about it. We're spending the afternoon together.
And I know there's a lot of people who watch the recording after, so thanks for watching the recording. A lot of people sign up and then have to watch it at a later time or a later date, so I just wanted to say thank you to all those people as well.
So shout out to all of those people.
Lorraine from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, taking lots of classes. Amazing. Jamie says, Bella, your work rocks so hard. Oh my God, thank you. Minneapolis is in the house.
Minneapolis in the house. So
yeah.
Yes.
Omaha is my homaha. That is probably my favorite line.
Is that Omaha is my home? I thought you made that up for a second.
No,
I was like, wow, that's right off the top of your head.
Ann made that up. Ann, you are today's
shout out to Ann. Yeah, quote of the day. Omaha is my homaha.
Quote of the week, man. All right, ready to get started?
Yeah, we can get started.
Let's go.
All right, so a couple more logistics. Bella touched on it. This is recorded. So if you're joining us at a later date, fantastic. This is the whole point, is that you can watch and make this recipe anytime that is convenient for you. If you're here joining us live, like a lot of you are, you could pause at any time. So the rate that we will be cooking is going to be at a good pace. We're not going to go so slow. So it's definitely helpful to have all of your equipment, your tools, your ingredients, everything nearby and around you. So that way we can cook right through it. If I do end up start going too fast for you, please, by all means, pause the video. You could catch back up. You could jump around in the video. You could watch it anytime. And then I'm always here to answer questions, whether it be on Instagram, on email. And so if you missed something or got lost at any point, I'm here for you. Just keep in mind, we're going to be cooking through everything. There are a lot of components to this. This is a dish that, like I said, you would find like on one of my tasting menus. So there's a lot of different things going on. We're going to cover a lot of different techniques today. And that being said, it might be easy to fall behind. I don't want to put that out there, but if it does, I don't want anyone to stress out. I don't want anyone to freak out. Cooking needs to be fun and enjoyable and relaxing, and that's why we're all here, right? To have a good time, to make some pasta, and to hang out, right? So, if you are enjoying yourself, of course, don't forget to take photos this whole time. Find me, tag me on Instagram. I love seeing everything that everybody's doing out there as they're cooking through the dishes. It's very inspiring for me. I really enjoy it. And it's always really great to see. So, you know what they say, if you don't take photos of your food first, it's not going to taste as good. I don't know if that's true, but I really enjoy doing food photography, and perhaps you do as well. So, a little roadmap for today. What we're going to be doing, we're going to start with our ragu. This is like our turkey bolognese, in quotes, right? And then we're going to jump over, make our sweet potato gnocchi. Then we're going to, while that's working, the dough is resting, we're going to make our marshmallows. We'll come back to the ragu. We'll finish off our gnocchi. We'll bring everything together, and kind of you'll see how all of these components become one. Very cool, right? Any questions as we begin to get going and get this show started? Let me know. So, what we're doing for our ragu here. We have all of our ingredients set up, ready to go. I have them on a tray. We're going to prep our veggies because that's the number one thing that we're going to need. We're going to make a bit of a sofrito. So sofrito is like, it's used in a lot of different cuisines. The Italians spell it differently than Spanish, but used in both cuisines. It's essentially a cooked down stew of veggies, a great base for any ragu or sugo, or in this case, bolognese style sauce. So for that, we're going to have our large round saute pan. You could use a Dutch oven or like a ragu pot or something like that. I like something wide in this case rather than deep, just because that allows everything to cook a little more evenly. And so that's what I'm always looking for. We're going to set that over on the stove and start to get that heating up. We're going to go for like a medium heat here, somewhere around like 300 degrees. That's about medium, right? And then we're going to take our butter from this portion of the recipe. I believe it's about 3 tablespoons. We're going to add that to the pan and allow that to start to melt and start to brown while we work on the veggies. So that way we're multitasking, we have multiple things happening at once, and we're never like just waiting for butter to brown, right? So butter is browning. That's going to be the base fat for our ragu. We're building a lot of these like warm holiday style flavors. Brown butter is just like a big warm hug from butter. I really enjoy it. You can use it a lot of different ways. It's great in sweet and savory applications. Now we have our veggies here, right? We got our small carrots, we got our celery ribs, and we got our white onion. I'm just going to do a quick peel on these carrots. I almost always peel carrots. The only time I find myself not wanting to peel carrots is when I'm using baby carrots and I'm roasting them whole. What I'll do is I'll give them a quick little scrub, usually with like a clean sponge or just in some warm water to loosen up any dirt. But I'll leave those peels on there when it comes to baby carrots, because then when you roast those peels kind of get a really nice texture. They're usually super thin because they're baby. And so you can eat them, you get that nice creamy soft carrot in the center and the crunchy kind of like exterior skin, which is a real nice contrast. All about textures when it comes to cooking. So for our sofrito, we're going to do this in a food processor. You could finely dice and finely mince all of these veggies, but I like taking some shortcuts, especially when I'm cooking at home, making my life easier. So that's what my food processor is going to do. All I have to do is help my food processor along the way by cutting these into rough cubes or pieces. Nothing precise, but something, around this size here or there. 1 by 2 inch sort of pieces like that. We can see our butter is already starting to sizzle. Keep half an eye on that. We're nowhere near brown yet, but that's eventually what we're going for. We're looking for that brown butter. And you can see in the pot. Let's go. Oh, there we go. Butter's roasting. Carrots are diced. We're going to get these into our food processor. Next up, our celery. So celery is already washed. You always want to watch for the ribs. I like to take off the bottom, this like thick white part down here. If I'm like making stock or juicing celery, I'll use the bottom. But for a sofrito like this, I just want the like tender center parts of the celery. So taking off the top, taking off the bottom. Going with 3 ribs, same thing, just like the carrots. The food processor is going to do most of the work. But I always like to get it started by just dicing it up into some large, rough chunks. Next veggie up here is our onion. So taking off the top and bottom, all very basic stuff. Splitting the onion in half, we're going to open it, take that peel off. Now when it comes to onions, I'm a big fan of the white onion. I'll use that almost exclusively unless there's a specific like Walla Walla or yellow onion that I want to use. But the reason being, I find the white onion to be a little more approachable, a little more digestible, not as pungent. You could eat a white onion raw, you can slice it very thin, you can put it into salads. It's much harder to do that with the yellow onion. They just have a little more oniony, that like pronounced onion flavor. So I just find the white to be more loving and homey. So I always go with the white onion, and that's just me. I'm going to quarter this, probably then cut it into what, halves, and then I think we're like in sixths, no, 12ths if you're actually counting. We're going to get all of our onion here into our food processor. And then last thing, of course, our garlic. So I think the recipe says 8 to 12 cloves. Garlic's one of those ingredients, especially when you're making bolognese or ragu or a lot of these like kind of Italian-American inspired dishes. You could go in a range of garlic. Hard to overdo it. If you really like garlic and you grew up watching Emeril Lagasse like I did, you go 36 cloves of garlic, yell bam, throw it all in here. Imagine the whole audience is cheering and applauding. Yeah, it's awesome. Or if you're a little more mild and timid, kind of like my mom was when it came to cooking and using garlic, you could stick with like a lower end, 6, 8 cloves, something like that. But we do have our cloves peeled here, right? That's what we're looking for. Making sure we have our peeled garlic. We get all that down into our food processor. Then now we just need a little bit of lubrication in here, and that's where our oil is going to come in. So we have our butter in the pan. The recipe calls for butter and oil. We're going to use our oil in our food processor here, and that's going to allow all of our veggies to spin, to chop, to mince, to dice, to break up into our small bit of what will be the base, our sofrito. So coming in here, I'm just going to eyeball it, give me a couple of drizzles of oil all the way around. Then I'm going to throw on the lid, and we're just going to give it a couple of pulses. Right, so we'll hit the power on, and then you'll see, depending on the size of your food processor, I always recommend starting and giving this a little bit of a scrape down partway through, just to make sure everything's breaking down nice and evenly. And you're not like riding up on the edges, coming up on the sides of the food processor there, because sometimes you'll end up with some chunks, and we want everything pretty homogeneous. We're going for like a nice veggie paste. Like if you ever made veggie stock using a paste, this is that same sort of process. So pulsing this down, and what the pulsing does, it allows the blade to stop, everything to settle, and the veggies to fall into the center. Then you hit that pulse button again, everything starts moving, and so it's almost like scraping it down rather than just keeping the blade on the whole time. You end up with a much more consistent dice of everything here in your food processor. And what's really great about a recipe like this is that, you notice I didn't use like specific cups or grams or anything for all of our sofrito and our veggies. It's very much just determining on kind of how you're feeling. You could free flow this. It doesn't need to be specifics because it's vegetables, right? If you wanted a ragu that's much more meat forward, maybe not as sweet from carrots or not as earthy from the celery, you could lower the amount of veggies that you're putting in here and leave it mostly meat. But I think for a dish like this, it's kind of nice to have those carrots. It'll add color. It's going to add that sweetness. The onions, the garlic, the celery, all those are going to bring a little bit of vegetalness and really kind of like round out our entire ragu sauce. But like I'm saying, you could really adapt this recipe and make a more traditional style bolognese in that sense, where maybe you're using less veggies, you're not using turkey, you're going to go all pork, maybe some veal in there. Then you kind of see how this is opening doors for you. You're kind of seeing different directions, different things you can do with it, and it really kind of makes something that you think is one recipe, now you have multiple versions of the same thing, and that's really what cooking and learning how to cook is all about. So, what we have here in our pan, our butter is just now starting to brown. We got a nice toasty, roasty, caramelized color. What that is all the water has evaporated. The milk solids have separated from the milk fat. And then those solids have started to brown, toast, and fry in their own fat. That's what brown butter is. No more water, essentially clarified butter and milk solids. So let's get nice and roasty and toasty here in our pan. Now we can come in with our veggies. We'll just pop this out. And we can scrape our veggies right down into the brown butter. And like I said, we already have our oil in here, right? So these are going to just add the fat to the pan. Don't worry about anybody sticking. And oh man, it already smells awesome. Onions, garlic, carrots, celery, brown butter. Like if you're going a vegetarian version of this dish, which I've done before,
it smells so good.
a really great option for that is to then additionally, once you get these going, in your food processor, grab like, you can do sweet potatoes, you can go parsnips, you go rutabagas, any of those like really kind of like starchy winter root vegetables. Pulse them up in here as well. Maybe leave them a little more coarsely cut than you did all of your veggies here. But then, after your veggies cook down and everything, instead of adding your meat to the pan, you could add all of those chopped up parsnips, all those chopped up celery root, anything like that. And then you'll let those cook and stew and cook down. And what you'll end up with is like a faux meat, if you're not kind of going that impossible beyond meat substitute route, which is a really great option. I've done dishes in the restaurant that have just been like a parsnip bolognese in the summertime, or I'm sorry, in the wintertime, with like shell or lumache pasta. It's like really, really fun, exciting take on what would normally be a meat-focused dish, but celebrating a vegetable and treating it like you would an expensive cut of meat. Usually always something I really pride myself on. So we can see here now all of our veggies are cooking down in the pan. Things are getting nice and soft, translucent. Now the thing with sofrito is that depending on where you want to go with this, there are times that I'll take sofrito, let this cook low and slow for 6, 8, 12 hours. All of the water will evaporate, the vegetables will get super soft, it'll turn into like a dark, almost caramel-like paste. All of those sugars will really start to caramelize, hence the caramel color. And it'll just get really, really intense. For a dish like this, I don't think that's necessary. I think a short cook on these, just where they're soft, they've married, they've all come together and kind of infused with that brown butter fat. And you're ready to kind of like take them to the next step. That being said, if you wanted to kind of push this, you had some time on your hands, and you wanted to let this ride for, maybe even an hour. Not that long, but let that go for an hour while you're doing something else or catching up on an email or social media. You can really let this cook down and develop some flavor. It'll bring out some of that sweetness in the carrots, which is a really kind of nice direction you can take this in. So
That smells so good.
it's lovely. Like this is a vegetarian delight on its own, is
I don't
it
know
not?
if it's cooking along at home, but if you are, like, and we are smelling the same thing right now, we are in heaven. Just saying.
Brown butter and sofrito. A brown butter sofrito. That just sounds lovely. So now I'm going to come in here, a little bit of salt. Want to get those vegetables seasoned, almost like when you're making soup, a ragu, or bolognese. Is the same sort of thing. We're going to season in layers multiple times throughout this, just to make sure each individual component has a nice amount of salt and seasoning all the way through. Good way to think of salt is not necessarily like you're adding saltiness. You're kind of like coaxing flavor out of whatever vegetables or meat or whatever it is that you're using. Salt just makes things taste more like themselves, and that's why it's important to use it slowly throughout the entire dish that you're cooking. So, excellent stuff, right? We're gonna let this cook for a couple of minutes. Medium heat still. Magic's happening over there in the pan. Now what we're gonna work on, we can start thinking about our sweet potato gnocchi. So in the world of gnocchi, there's a lot of different directions you can go. If you've taken some of my other gnocchi classes, you know what I'm about to talk about. If you haven't, I always find this very interesting. It's a good insight into Italian food and Italian cooking and regionality and how much recipes and food really kind of allow Italians to connect to their roots and to their different areas and heritages. So a friend of mine was writing a book. Her name is Jen Lewis. She's a chef The book is called Pasta by Hand. I have it over there on the shelf. And she went to Italy. She spent, I think, like 6 or 8 months in Italy, traveling around, researching for this book. And what she would do is she would go to each town, go into that small village and city, wherever it was, find a local artisan or a family or a chef, and ask them. And all she would say is, I'm writing a book. I want you to teach me how to make gnocchi. Can you teach me how to make gnocchi? And with no other specifics around that. And what she found out, and how this book kind of came to be, is that every single person during this 6 or 8 month trip would give her a different recipe. And so this whole book really kind of talks about how gnocchi or pasta or whatever it may be, dumplings in general, there's no rules written as to what a proper gnocchi is, because everybody does it how they were taught. Some had eggs, some had potatoes, some had sweet potatoes, some used corn, some used polenta, some used wilted greens, some used only cheese, some used old bread. So really, it was just this huge combination of different heritages and histories of the different people. And so today we're making a sweet potato gnocchi, but like I said, you can really use anything as your base for the gnocchi. Question.
Diamond crystal or fine salt, says Carol.
Carol, good question. Diamond crystal or fine salt. I only essentially use diamond crystal in my house. I have like a flaky Malden salt I'll use for finishing. But never fine salt. I just feel like it's too fine. It's hard to use. Where diamond crystal is pretty much universal. I can pick up diamond crystal. I know how to touch it. I know how to feel it. I could touch a salt and tell you if it's diamond crystal or not instantly, because that's how comfortable I am with using diamond crystal. And so if you're like new into cooking, or even if you're like you're a little intermediate and like you want to up your cooking game, switch to diamond crystal. Only use diamond crystal and season with your hands. Don't do like a shaker bottle or a twister. Use your fingers, and you'll really start to learn what salt tastes like based on touch. And so you'll season a little bit, you'll taste it, you'll season, you'll taste it, and you'll learn eventually what saltiness is in your hands. Question.
Ever done a vegan spin on this? I ask because I have vegan friends and it seems like a great idea, but unsure of substitutions for the dairy and the egg. Good question, Ann.
Yes. Who asked that? Ann. Great question, Ann.
From Omaha.
Omaha, my Omaha. How many times can we say that today? All right, I'm lowering this just a tiny bit because I don't want it to brown. But we're just kind of like washing it. We're scraping down the bottom. We're making sure we're cooking nice and evenly. So a vegan version of this. Absolutely. What I would do is either grab some of that egg substitute. And what the egg is doing in this case, or the egg substitute, is acting as a binder. It's almost like your training wheels, your insurance policy, to make sure that your dumplings hold together when they're cooking. But in theory, there are gnocchi purists out there, I'm not necessarily one of them, that will tell you you can only make gnocchi if you use potato and flour alone. So with that in mind, you could use only sweet potato, you can use only flour, and make a really nice dumpling that's going to hold together. You just have to get that texture and consistency right, where it's not too sticky, it's not too dry. You have enough flour in there to bind it, but not too much, to where it gets kind of stodgy, but not too little where it falls apart when you go and cook it. A lot of that, you can always just test it. You know, cut off a little piece, test the dumpling, put it in the water. Does it fall apart? Does it hold up? Do you like the taste of it? You're good. You're great. Your dough's done. You don't like it? Add some more flour, keep working it, bring it together, and then give yourself another little tester. For this, or ragu, absolutely. Easy to make vegan. You know, leave out the cheese, leave out the milk. You could even use, I've made this with oat milk before. Oat milk's my go-to milk substitute because I don't drink a lot of dairy at home at all. And oat milk works great in almost all recipes where you would find milk. And then obviously leave out the butter. So you're vegan, no problem, right? So now, great. We are looking good here. Our veggies are getting nice and soft. They're cooking down. What we're going to do here now, it's been maybe, 5-10 minutes or so. Got a nice smooth veggie paste. We're going to come in with our herbs. And we're going to allow our herbs to start to cook into the veggies. Kind of infuse that flavor. I have my chiffonade sage and my chopped thyme. I'm going to add almost all the herbs and hold back maybe like one nice big tablespoon there. That way we can add our herbs in layers. And right now these are going to cook down They're going to do their job. They're going to infuse into our sofrito. But then I want to kind of give a blast of that herbiness, that saginess, all that thyme right at the end as well. So that way we're kind of like layering on that herb flavor all the way throughout the dish. So now herbs are cooking in. You almost need like a soundboard over there, right? So coming up next, now we're coming in with our meat. So for this, obviously sticking with our holiday theme, we're going to go turkey, ground turkey. More recently, it's become much more common and available to even have options when you're buying ground turkey. So I was very surprised and pleasantly surprised to see you could buy ground turkey breasts or ground turkey thighs, opposed to just like generic ground turkey. I always go for the thighs when I'm doing like a cooked low and slow sort of dish like this. The breasts just have not as much muscle, not as much fat. It's white meat, and so it's going to dry out much more quickly versus the thighs. Question.
Thoughts on using dried thyme instead of fresh?
You can absolutely use dried herbs in all cases. Seasoned to taste. Every brand of dried herb is going to be a little more pungent or less pungent than the other. And so no problem using dried herbs at all. I probably, in that case, would add all of my dried herbs here in the beginning and not try to bounce in some dried herbs at the end. Because if you just add dried herbs at the end, they're not going to have a chance to bloom. They're not going to allow to like kind of wake up and do their magic. And so you want to get everybody in there right at the beginning. Let them cook with the dish the entire time. So now we're going to come in with our turkey. And if you eat pork, I feel like you couldn't make an Italian ragu without using pork. So I got a little bit of pork in here as well. If you don't eat pork, it's still going to be delicious. I just find pork to be super unctuous and flavorful and kind of like that base of ragu flavor that you're going for. So we just want to come in, and whether you're going to use like one of those guacamole mashers, the meat mallet sort of thing. I think I even put a link down in the description down below perhaps to a meat squisher that I really like. I just didn't feel like grabbing it today. But what we're going to do is break up all of the turkey, all that pork, get it broken down into the small little pieces. And what we can now, as this is starting to break down, is come in again one more time with salt. So we've added another ingredient. Time to go another little sprinkling, another little layer of salt in there. That way we're building on our flavors. We're working this all together.
Thomas says, show us the other side of your hat, Joe. Boom, baby.
So we're rocking the Eat Pasta Make Love hat today. I also have the tortellini ones as well. Oh wow, that got really steamy on the inside when I put that back on. So both of these are available.
Call Chef Joe, you just put it over steam.
Yeah, I like caught it and then I didn't realize I was putting it on my head.
This is a spa, dude.
Our Bolognese spa. So both the hats, if you're interested, if you're into it, maybe you know a pasta lover in your life, holidays are coming up, birthdays, they're available on our website, justasta.com. You can find your way there, the shop. So if you're into that sort of thing, thank you, Thomas, for the shout out. So what we got here, our meat is breaking all down. And what I'm looking for here is I don't necessarily need super caramelized and browned all the way through. What I care about a lot more is that I'm breaking down all of these pieces into really finely ground sort of mince. So then that way it coats all of my noodles, all of my pasta, whatever it is that I'm tossing this with. And I'm not left with any like big meat craters or meat chunks that are going to have a really hard time kind of breaking down. So it's always important to take a little extra minute or so here. Break this all down. I'm going to turn the heat up just a bit. So now we're on like medium high. We're talking like 360 or so, if you're keeping track. We're going to allow this to just get a little bit of color down on that bottom layer. Let the temperature of the pan come back up because we just added a bunch of meat right out of the fridge. Let this all kind of cook together. Now, as that's going, one of my other dominant flavors I really like that layers through this whole dish is white pepper. White pepper kind of just has this like warming spice note to it versus black pepper is just I don't like the word generic, is much more familiar. White pepper is a little more unfamiliar. And so to kind of make this dish a little more interesting, I like kind of layering on the white pepper. And so we got our meat in there. We could go on a nice cracks of white pepper. And I'm the kind of person that has 3 different pepper mills at home. I have a little one for my white peppercorns. I have a big one for my black peppercorns. And I have an even smaller one for my Szechuan peppercorns, because I really like adding those to things when I'm cooking too as well. So those are all my 3 go-to pepper mills. If anyone else has more than 1 pepper mill, I'd love to hear about it. I want to be told that I'm not the only one that has 3 different pepper mills on their counter. Then again, Bella already asked me why I have 3 different pepper mills at one point, but now she knows. Now she knows why there are 3 pepper mills on the counter.
I think I probably ask once a week. Though.
Yes. What do you need all these pepper mills here? Why do you have so many pepper mills? I was like, because it's 3. You're lucky it's only 3. I could go more peppers if I wanted. I have more peppercorns. They're just not in mills. All right. So this is going. We're gonna get a tiny bit of color down on the bottom before we deglaze with our wine. So we're gonna build a little bit of a fond there. Just one little layer. We can start thinking about now our food processor and our potatoes. So we're using sweet potatoes in this case versus yams. So kind of, I guess, a little history lesson. Shout out to culinarians out there that are keeping track of sweet potatoes versus yams and kind of what happened. It's a very interesting story. What we know here in the U.S. as a yam is not really a yam. We don't have access to yams for the most part here in the U.S. Everything is a sweet potato, whether it be a white sweet potato, purple sweet potato, or orange sweet potato. A yam is actually a West African, Caribbean sort of vegetable that came from that area, and it is much more fibrous. It's a little less nutritious. It has a really kind of rough brown exterior and a white flesh. So not at all what we're used to when we use the word yams. To make things even more confusing, the FDA requires sweet potatoes also be labeled as yams for whatever reason, and so that complicated things. But what we have here in the New World, brought over by Columbus and the Spaniards and all of the kind of explorers that came over very early on, they brought sweet potatoes. That's what we know. Sweet potatoes then now became one of the crops here that we grow in the U.S. We do not grow yams here. And if you find a yam, give it a try, but most likely you're not going to find one, interestingly enough. So those candy yams you eat around the holidays are actually sweet potatoes. So for this, sweet potatoes do not have very much starch, so that works to our advantage when making gnocchi. You don't have to worry about them, like I said, cooling down. Now you can make these a day in advance. I always like to bring them back to room temperature before working with them, and that's kind of why the recipe suggested keeping them in the oven or keeping them warm till we're going to use them, just so that way they weren't ice cold right out of the fridge. But I roasted these earlier. They've been sitting on the counter for a couple of hours, and they're totally fine, ready to go. There's no starch in here. So because there's no starch, we can use the food processor versus a russet potato is very starchy. If you try to throw that in the food processor, it's going to get gummy, it's going to get gunky, it's going to get chewy, and it's not going to be very good. So we can do all of our heavy lifting, our hard work here, processing our eggs, our cheese, our brown butter, our ricotta, our parm, our potatoes, everything together in the food processor to help begin our dough that we're working on, right? So we'll start by all of our potatoes going into the mixer here. Beautiful. Now we have our egg yolks. We're saving our whites for our marshmallow, a little fluffy topping that's going to go on top. Just be mindful, your whites can't have any fat in them. If you accidentally broke a yolk and got a little bit diluted, it's not going to work. You need to have pure, clean whites. That being said, we got our ricotta, we got our white egg yolks. That ricotta is going to be our cheesiness, our fattiness, because there's not much fat in these potatoes either, and fat is flavor, and so we're kind of making like a hybrid-ish ricotta gnocchi, sweet potato gnocchi, all that good stuff. This parm is going to add a nice bit of saltiness and nuttiness, and then to kind of carry that brown butter flavor through the whole dish, we're going melted, or if it's solidified a little bit, softened brown butter into our food processor. Question.
Carol wants to know, did you roast yours whole or cut up?
So I've done it. Carol's asking if I roasted my sweet potatoes whole or I did them cut up. So I've done it both ways. I originally wrote this recipe with the sweet potatoes roasted whole with holes poked in them, and then I peeled them after they were roasted. And that's always how I've done it, and it comes out great. Today, or not today, the other day when I was testing this out, I tried it by peeling them first, tossing them in a little bit of salt and oil, roasting them, and then making it as well, and I didn't really notice a difference. And now I know for like potato gnocchi, there is a difference, and you can't do it this way, but I think that's kind of the magic of the sweet potato that we're using. It's just a little more versatile. So I cut mine up, peeled them before, roasted them, then we could go right into the food processor with them versus having to scoop out the flesh. And I think I sent out a message about that this morning on Chef's Feed, just in case anyone was paying attention or trying to prep or get ahead. This is a great way to kind of shortcut that entire process. So I smell this over here. It's getting nice and roasty. I can smell a little bit of a fond building. We're going to come back to our pan. We're going to deglaze with some white wine. And now a great little tip here. If you don't drink alcohol or you don't want to open an entire bottle of white wine just to make this dish, you can use water and lemon juice. You're really just kind of going for that acid. So a little bit of water, a little bit of lemon juice kind of gives you that same effect as wine if you so wanted to do that. Next, as soon as that wine, the booze cooks off, you kind of smell immediately as soon as there's no more alcohol in there. We could come in with our milk. Now milk is a very common ingredient in almost all the Bologneses. That bit of fat, it's going to separate. It's going to help make everything nice and unctuous. Those milk solids are going to caramelize kind of just like they did with the brown butter. And it's going to add a wee bit of creaminess to this as well. So we're scraping up all that fond. We're building layers of flavor. That milk's going to cook down almost immediately as well. And we can already see this thickening up rather nicely. Now once you see that milk kind of cooks off, there's no more liquid down in the bottom of the pan. Now we can come in with our stock. If you're not using stock, chicken stock, beef stock, veggie stock, you could totally use water here in this case. There's nothing wrong with that. And we're just going to add enough water here, maybe a little bit more, to cover, ever so gently. We'll cover all of our meat, all of those veggies, and we're going to lower the temperature of the pan just to allow this to cook down. And so we're going for a nice gentle simmer. Again, one last time now before we let this aside to cook, I'm going to come in with one more sprinkling of salt. And I'm not adding a ton of salt every time that I do this. We're not like going for like overly salty and overly seasoned. But just like I said, we're building and layering on that flavor. And so that way they're seasoning throughout the entire dish. Salt worked through the whole thing, layer by layer by layer. So now, you could always give this a little tasty taste, which I recommend. Always check your work, kind of see where we're at in terms of salt, in terms of pepper, kind of like to cook. And then you could like see how flavors develop and how things change over time. So like we see where we are now, and then we'll see what it's like in about 30 minutes when we get back to it. It is hot, be careful. Oh yeah. It'll come along real nicely there. I do want a little bit of salt. Herbaceous. Lots of veggie flavors there. The turkey and the pork meld together beautifully. And then you get that like sage, the thyme. It's like all those wonderful warm holiday flavors all together in one. And then like I said, we'll lower the temperature here. Just so we're not like boiling. We're going for like a low, gentle simmer. Just to allow this to marry and come together. We want to reduce that cooking liquid just a little bit, not too much, to allow everything to tighten up and get nice and creamy. What I've actually done, yeah, question?
I'm curious why you use wine instead of bread.
What's that?
Wine.
I didn't have any bottle of red wine. I had a bottle of white wine. So that's why I'm using white instead of red.
And then Lauren said, did you add the parm at this point?
No, parm is still here on the side. The parm is going to be when we finish, bring everything together, and same with the mascarpone. So we have parm, mascarpone, and parsley still on the side. Our remaining ingredients here, and thank you for calling me out for using the white wine instead of the red wine. But it's what I had in front of me. So no particular reason other than I only had white wine today.
But that's cooking in the kitchen, because if you don't have something, it's good to
Yeah, it's not like you have to run out to the store and buy a bottle of red wine. Yeah. Or not make a recipe entirely. And I think that's like always really important to kind of understand and to think about, is that like, you know, recipes are roadmaps. They're guidelines. You don't have to follow them to a T. You're allowed to kind of take your own journey along the way. Now that being said, I wouldn't recommend, you know, subbing out mustard for mayonnaise. Those are two totally different ingredients, but...
I mean, you could, but it depends on the recipe, dude.
Right. All right.
Like, come on.
I'm going to go a little more...
On a sandwich, you could totally sub.
Yeah, okay. On a sandwich, yes.
Okay, what else is it? What else?
Okay, so we all know, have we heard the, like, cover your turkey in mayo trick before baking?
No, like, that's gross.
No, that's the thing. That's a move.
I know it's a thing, but no thank you.
Oh, you're not into the move.
No,
what do you
mean, the move? There's more than just one move.
I mean, that's a good move.
I don't know about that.
I've never done it. I've always wanted to try it.
Exactly. You've never done it, so there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I can't bring myself to try it. I agree with you. It seems weird. In every year of your existence, you've never tried it. You've never tried it for a reason. True. Fair. I've never tried it. I've always wanted to try it. I just haven't. One last thing I almost forgot. No one remembered to call me out on it yet. Is the nutmeg. So nutmeg, one of my favorite ingredients when making ragouts, and I always use fresh. Give that a quick little, maybe like 10 or 12 grates all the way around. If you're using already pre-ground nutmeg, it's not as strong, and you could usually go a couple of pinches in there. But we're really kind of like layering on all of these warm flavors, all these warm spices. Bringing this together. Oh, baby. We're going to Mount Mamma Mia, everyone. Forget about Flavor Town. We are going to Mount Mamma Mia.
Wait, okay, that's the new thing. Did you just make that up?
Yeah, because I was about to say Mamma Mia, but I was like, no.
Mount Mamma Mia.
We're going to Mount Mamma Mia.
Next time we talk to
Yeah, next time we're hanging out with Guy Fieri, I'm going to let him know I can't wait to get phrase for him. We're not going to Flavor Town, Mount Mamma Mia. We're going north. So here in our food processor, we got our egg yolks, our brown butter, our 2 cheeses, and our sweet potatoes. No flour yet in here. We're just going to give ourselves a nice, smooth, creamy paste as our base. Then this will become the base of our dumplings. Alright, we'll let that rip until it's nice.
That was pretty loud.
I know, that's why I didn't talk while it was happening. That's why I wasn't trying to talk over the mixer.
Yes, chef.
So, we got our nice, smooth, creamy, homogeneous sweet potato mix. It should be nice and thick. We're not looking for a thin mixture, because a thin mixture, we're going to have to add more flour to it. The goal here now is to add just enough flour to bring this together to where it's not sticky or messy, but it's nice, tight, almost like a biscuit dough. Right? I don't know if you've made biscuits before, but it's the closest thing you're looking for is a biscuit dough to a gnocchi dough.
I've made Pillsbury biscuits.
Not the same. Not the same. Similar, but different. And you know, it's funny because I always use the reference of a biscuit dough, but I don't remember the last time that I made biscuits. I'm like always inspired to make biscuits because I see Mei Lin make biscuits all the time.
Well, last year I think. Probably last year you made biscuits.
I didn't make them.
Yes, you did.
Did I?
Totally made biscuits during quarantine. Who didn't make biscuits during quarantine, dude?
I feel like I had to have made biscuits.
Everyone made biscuits.
I don't think I did.
He's like, did you make bread? Yes.
I made lots of bread.
Yeah. Everyone made
There was
bread.
a lot of bread happening during quarantine. quarantine. All right. So now I'm going to go here into a mixing bowl. This is going to help keep things nice and contained. You can go right onto the countertop. It just tends to get a little messier a little quicker. If you start in a bowl, you can slowly add your flour before going to your countertop. And I just find that helps keep things nice and contained and you're not getting flour everywhere immediately. Now I just need a spoon. We'll go all of our sweet potato, eggy, doughy mixture. This is going to be our base for our gnocchi. Good looking stuff. Beautiful.
Epicurean Santa Barbara says, mine isn't as thick as yours, chef. It looks like more like hummus. Is that okay?
So yes, very good question, Epicurean Santa Barbara. Yours is a little thinner than mine. And so the reason being is that like vegetables like a sweet potato are always going to vary in moisture. It also depends on like yours may be a little more watery, maybe then not as much of that moisture cooked off in the oven. Maybe mine were a little drier for whatever reason, more moisture cooked off in my oven. All that's going to be okay. What that just keep in mind, mine does kind of look like a hummus here. I mean, depending on if you like a thick or smooth hummus. But we're close to a hummus. You're just going to end up having to add a little more flour than I do. So that's going to be the only difference. It's not going to be the end of the world. Nothing's going to change. You're just going to have to keep in mind that, hey, this requires a little more flour than the one that I'm making. That's the only difference. I'm going to get, let's see, got a little scooper here. And we'll start by adding about a half a cup of flour at a time. And I like to do this in increments. Just that way I can fold the flour.
Epicurean Santa Barbara, her name's Amy.
Amy!
Or I'm sorry, their name's Amy. Sorry.
Nice to meet you, Amy. Thank you for sharing your name, not hiding behind the title Epicurean Santa Barbara. Do you like blog or Instagram, or is that where I'm curious where that your title came from? Just if you want to shout yourself out, I'm into it. Alright, so what we're doing here is we are folding our sweet potato mixture together with the flour. I'm using a large wide spoon similar to a spatula. You can do this with a spatula. I wouldn't necessarily use like a whisk or something like that. But we're scraping down on the bottom. We're pressing the dough over itself, much like if you're folding together a cake or a souffle. Slowly bringing this together. And so mine is still rather sticky. That's only been about a half cup of flour. We're aiming for perhaps 1 to 2 cups of flour total, depending on how wet our sweet potato mixture was. So Amy, you might need closer to the 2 cup mark versus I may need maybe the 1 cup mark. So I'm at about 1 cup right there. I'm not measuring it. That's one of those things about gnocchi that you'll all come to learn and see. The more gnocchi you make, it's very hard to measure. It's always going to be a little bit different because potatoes are never the same. Sometimes they're very wet, sometimes they're very dry. Sometimes you cook off a lot of moisture, sometimes some of that moisture stays in there. And so it's just hard to say it needs exactly X amount of flour because there are always those variables. So it's easier instead to use your hands, use your fingers, and your intuition to really kind of like tell you and guide you, hey, is this getting sticky or is this coming together like a nice dough? So once I see that it is starting to come together like a dough, maybe we'll go up to a quick close-up shot here so we can see what we're looking at. You see our ragu is boiling nicely, nice little simmer there, slowly reducing. Our dough is getting to this point where now I could kind of like slowly manipulate it. I'm going to use my hands to kind of bring this together. Start squeezing it and pressing it. Just like if I was making like a ricotta gnocchi or dumpling like that. Scraping off my fingers just to kind of keep everything nice and clean. Best that I can. And I feel like I'm a little sticky still in the center. And what we're going for here is it's going to be dry on the outside, but it'll still be a little tacky and a little sticky in the center. And that's going to be okay. That's a good sign of a dough. If it's dry all the way through, it'll probably then be a little like tough or gummy when you cook it. Versus if you find something where it's just dry on the outside, where you can handle it and you manipulate it, but then it's still a little tacky if you really like dig your hand down into the center, and you'll be in a good spot. So I'm getting close there. I'm able to pick the whole mass up. It's sticking together as one nice dough ball. I'm just kind of turning it and pressing it onto itself very gently, just to kind of like fold still that flour into the mix.
Ooh, Carol says going to use 100% whole grain Sonora from Gristentol. Love Gristentol.
Oh, love it, Carol. You must be from LA, right?
I mean, maybe.
Maybe. Are you not from LA and you're getting Gristentol somewhere else? That'd be even more exciting, actually. But if not, Gristentol is a local mill in Pasadena. Nan is the lovely lady who runs the mill, and she does all specialty heirloom varieties of wheat, working with mostly California farmers, but she does source the wheat sometimes from out of state, usually looking for the best. A lot of times Arizona, because the desert is actually a really great environment for growing a lot of these heirloom varieties of wheat, believe it or not. Interesting stuff.
Carol is from LA.
I knew it. Not like I'm stalking you, Carol. It's okay. I just know where Gristentol is. So, let's take half an eye once we get through this. I feel really good about my dough. We're getting to this point now. Let's take a look, close-up cam. Right over here where we're at. I got a nice dough ball, very much like a biscuit, right? So it's held together. It's not sticky on the outside. It's nice and dry. If I were to rip this open or apart, it will be sticky in the center, which is totally okay. That's fine. I'm going to clean off my hands, get rid of any of this extra dough. We don't need any of that. I'll probably dust a little more flour on the top, just to make sure things don't stick as this is hanging out. Beautiful. Now we have our dough. I'm keeping it in my bowl. Now I have much less of a mess on my countertop here to clean up. Obviously, we're going to have to roll this out. We're going to get a little messy later when it comes to rolling out our dough, but it'll help keep things nice and contained to not have to do that just yet, because we still have our, what am I going to say? Our marshmallows left to make. So that's what we're going to work on next.
That's why everyone's here, right? For the marshmallows.
That's why, I mean, they're one of my favorite components.
That's why I'm here today. I don't know about y'all, but...
You're going to go hard on marshmallows later?
Oh, you know.
Sugar Crush. Sugar Rush.
Rush.
Sugar Crush is a candy game? No. Candy Crush is a game, right?
Oh, no, dude.
Yeah, it is. All right, so we have our dough. I'm going to throw a towel, a clean kitchen towel, over the bowl, just so this doesn't dry out as this is sitting here. We're going to set this aside right by our flour. Now we'll transfer our ragu from over here. Give that a quick stir. Just make sure nobody's burning. Everybody's hanging out. Looking good. The liquid's not reducing so much to the point that it's dry. If it does, you could add a little more stock or a little more water. But we're looking for a nice creamy, thick ragu. You know, something you want to toss your pasta in and dive right into. Like a big crusty loaf of Italian bread. So I'm going to put that over on a separate burner over there just so it continues to simmer and reduce. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to get started on our marshmallow. And I put marshmallow in quotes because it's one step away from a marshmallow. We're making like a Swiss meringue versus an Italian meringue or a French meringue. I find the Swiss meringue to be the easiest, the most approachable, and the most stable. Now a marshmallow is a meringue with gelatin, so that way it sets and it holds its shape. But without the gelatin, it's just a meringue. And since we're not trying to make this days in advance and have like pieces of it sprinkled on top, we don't need to worry about making marshmallows. Marshmallows are messy. We're making a quick meringue here. So for that, I'm going to use a little pot, just that my stand mixer bowl fits nice on top of. In this pot is some water, what we're going to call a double boiler. So the bottom is going to boil. This double part is going to sit on top. Now at the same time, while we're getting this ready, you could use your same pot that you're going to need to cook your pasta in. So if you haven't already filled up a pot with water, allow that to slowly come to a boil. Now would be a time to do that. That could be this same pot. I have a separate pot I'm going to use for cooking my pasta. But like I said, you could multitask and use the same pot. The one thing you want to keep in mind is that your pot does not touch the water, because then it'll actually like act as a cooking vessel versus a steam vessel. And the steam's going to be much more gentle on your mixture than if you did not if it was touching it, right? That makes sense?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so question?
Lexical Jewel said, for Swiss meringue, I use carton egg whites, but for this I was going to separate eggs properly.
Okay, good question. You normally use, make sure I understand this right, you normally use carton egg whites, but for this you're going to separate eggs. What's beautiful about this is you should have 2 clean egg whites because your dough used 2 egg yolks. So the idea here is that you're not wasting any eggs and you're not having to open up more eggs unnecessarily. That being said, if you want to just go ahead and use your carton or not, whatever you want to do. We're going to start with some sugar down in the base of our bowl. It's about 120 grams. In a Swiss meringue, normally, you would probably use a little more than 120 grams, maybe even double that, just so it's very sweet. But in this case, we don't want this to be so sweet like a meringue or a marshmallow. We're going for the savory application, right? So we want to put it on top of pasta. We don't want it to be like a sugary treat. We want it to have just that essence of sweetness. I would say 120 grams is about a quarter to a half of a cup. Maybe you could call it a third of a cup. I don't know because I don't have those cup scoops around. I use all scales. Next, hold on, I can't reach. We have the other 2 egg whites. So we have here just sugar and egg whites.
Lexical Jewel said, for Swiss only, yes, perfect. I didn't do my needs, obviously. Thanks, Bella. Great.
Thank you. We're going to add cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is an acid. It helps stabilize whipped eggs and proteins. So about a quarter teaspoon or so. I would just eyeball it. Give myself a couple of nice little sprinkles in there. We'll come in with a little bit of salt because this is a savory meringue. So we do want a nice bit of saltiness in there. And then, of course, our white pepper. This is what's really going to make this over the top. Take this out of the sweet world and into the savory world by adding that white pepper to the marshmallow mixture. So now I like to come in here with a spatula, setting this over my now boiling double boiler. And what we're going to do is we do want to kind of stay here with this. We're going to mix together the whites and the sugar, all those components in there. Scraping down the sides, and I like to use a spatula for this just to make sure everything is getting scraped off the edges, nothing's kind of like climbing up the sides of the bowl, and everything's staying nice and contained down in the bottom. So we are monitoring this, scraping and stirring, and what we're doing here is bringing the egg up to temperature and melting the sugar into the egg mixture. So a Swiss meringue is much more stable because the egg is cooked. So ideally you have a kitchen thermometer of some kind. You can use a frying thermometer, but a kitchen thermometer is pretty crucial to know when this gets up to 175 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the magic temperature where the whites are set, and we could transfer this to our stand mixer to cool. And that's why I'm using my stand mixer bowl, so I can plop this right onto my mixer with the whisk attachment and allow this to beat up and turn fluffy into a meringue. So it happens rather quickly. If you have a really nice rolling boil down at the bottom and you're standing here stirring, making sure that like the egg's not cooking, it's not coming up on the sides of the bowl. You'll have a real nice meringue in no time. So the difference, if you ever wondered, there are 3 different styles of meringues. You have, like I said, a Swiss meringue, that's what we're making here, where you cook the egg whites over a double boiler with the sugar. There's Italian meringues, where you beat egg whites in the mixer and you stream in hot sugar syrup, honey, sugar syrup, something like that. And that hot liquid going into the mixer cooks the eggs and allows everything to become stable. And then there's the French meringue, which is probably the least stable of all of them. in which you just have sugar and eggs in a mixer and you beat them together until they become aerated. So you kind of have like beaten egg whites with sugar added that allows it to get nice and fluffy. That French meringue is the least stable because the eggs aren't cooked. Least stable meaning it could collapse. It's not going to last much more beyond an hour or so. Where this, in theory, you could make the day before and it's still going to stay nice and keep well, whether in a piping bag or an airtight container, something like that. So looking down in the bowl, if you're curious, there's no like secrets or magic going on here. I just still have like liquid whites, eggs, and sugar all together. And I'm just scraping down all the edges here just to make sure nobody's creeping up the sides and starting to cook on the edge of the pan. And then every so once in a while, I'm going to stick my thermometer in here. And we're going for 175 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm at 134, 140. We're getting there. 145. All right, we need a little more time, a little more mixing. So now, keep in mind, like I said, you don't want to walk away from this. It only takes a couple minutes. Once we have it on the stand mixer and things are starting to actually whip and to beat, you can walk away from it. And it kind of goes on autopilot at that point. But right now is when you have to stay with it. You got to use your spatula. And you kind of got to monitor and watch this. Now, I know you could probably make this without a stand mixer. It's going to take you a while. It's going to be much harder. You're just literally going to have to stand there with a whisk and whisk this until it cools and it aerates and it becomes nice and fluffy. Not to say you can't do that, because I'm sure there are people that have made meringues and have made marshmallows without a mixer. Just a mixer is much nicer in terms of convenience, right? These days we're all looking for convenience. So you can see this is starting to thicken up a bit, yes. Looking in there, we got a nice thick white eggy mixture. We're looking for 175. We're at 155. It's climbing. 160. 165. 67. We're getting there. All right, we got about 5 more degrees. We're close. And now, I always like to add a squeeze of lemon juice when I take it off the heat and I start beating it into the mixer. So if you want to add a little more of that acid, a little more savoriness, a little squeeze of lemon juice definitely goes a long way in here. And I always add that, like I said, right as it's starting to beat in our mixer. We're getting very close. I feel like I gotta be just seeing how thick this is getting. Let's see. Let's go. 167, 168, 171, 172, 176. That's 175 in my book. All right, we're there. We're getting nice and thick. We're getting frothy. We're getting fluffy. Those eggs are cooking ever so nicely. And gently is key. So now what we're going to do is grab our stand mixer. We have our whisk beater attachment. And now things might get loud just for a second. What we're going to do is put this on high speed. Like I said, we're going to add a squeeze of lemon juice here. And then we're just going to beat this on high until the bowl becomes cool to the touch. At which point then it's ready to go. Easy enough, right? So I'm going to set this down over here. We're going to let that go. We're done with this water here, yes. I'm going to grab my other pot of water, and this is going to be my pasta pot. So I'm going to get this onto the stove. We're going to start getting that heating up so we have a pot boiling, ready to go to cook our pasta when the time comes. We have, let's take a look. at our ragu. We're getting very close here. You want to take a little close up. Things are getting nice and thick, nice and creamy. There's still a bit of liquid down on the bottom of the pan, but not too much. Now this is when I'm going to come in with the rest of my fresh herbs. The last of that sage, the last of that thyme. Just so those can bloom and cook down into here. And if you notice this gets to the point where there's no more liquid, we can kill the heat. We can let this hang out. We don't want to cook it to the point where it's totally dried out. We want it to stay nice and creamy and moist. I'm going to give it one little taste here. Little taste test action, as always. Right? Make sure you're checking your work. Oh yeah. Lots of flavors going on there. Savory, tiny bit sweet from the carrot. Porky, unctuous. My favorite part, I think, about making Bolognese ragu style is when you add that little bit of milk. Because it's like, you don't know the milk is there, but it's like just enough to kind of like, the milk starts to separate. Things get kind of like magical in there. The milk solids caramelize that way, starts to cook off. It adds a little bit of sourness. Like all really, really good things. So, checking that down here. We're back with our mixer. The bowl is getting nice and cool to the touch. It's been about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I know that because I have a little timer on the side of my mixer here. Shout out to Breville, right? Good stuff. I'm going to go high speed for like 30 seconds. Gorgeous. Look at this. Fluffy. We have marshmallow fluff. How about that? Magical little whip on the end of the whisk beater. So in our bowl here we got...
lemon juice.
Yes, we put that in before it was mixing.
I know, because I don't know, I just saw it.
You just shouted out lemon juice?
No, it's just the lemon juice. I am some lemon juice on here.
I was like, yes. If you haven't put your lemon juice in, yeah, put your lemon juice in. We put the lemon juice in before we started beating it, right when we took it off the heat, just so that way it's worked in and you're not cooking your lemon juice on the stove. I like to add it right as I start to mix. But now you have this beautiful marshmallow. Now, if you wanted to actually like set this as a marshmallow, you need a little bit of cornstarch, you need a little bit of gelatin. The cornstarch would put it out on the tray, gelatin would go into here, make sure it's bloomed, and then you can let this set. It'll solidify, and then you can chop it, cut it, make marshmallows. But in our case here, I like to just spoon this right on top. We can pipe it, put it in a piping bag. I'm going to save plastic and not use the piping bag. I'm just going to spoon it right from our bowl when we're ready for it. Now, if you find yourself with some extra marshmallow fluff and you're like, oh, I don't want to put it on peanut butter sandwiches, or I don't know how much pasta I can eat, a great extra use for this. And if anyone does this, please tag me in it, because I'd love to see your adventures of that. Is you could spoon this very rustically, any size, onto a baking tray with parchment or a silpat. Put it into a low oven, like 225, low temperature for like 2 to 3 hours. And what you're then end up with is like a meringue or a pavlova. You'll have this like really crunchy exterior, soft, fluffy, almost chewy interior. You could crumble that all on top of ice cream. You could spoon ice cream on top of it. You could do pastry cream or whipped cream, some like macerated fruit or berries. You could put pumpkin pie filling all over it, apple pie filling, and you have a then sweet and savory pavlova that could either be like a little snack for the beginning of the meal or the end, because that white pepper could kind of go either way in this case. Cool, right? We're just learning tons of different techniques today. I love it. I love it. Sharing knowledge. All right, so our dough, our gnocchi, is ready to turn into gnocchi, right? We have our gnocchi dough here in our bowl. Now the moment we've all been waiting for. We're going to go right onto our work surface. I had plenty of extra flour dusted onto my dough ball here. So I'm not like worried about getting a bunch of extra dough or extra flour all over the place. It just tends to get a little messy if you just start dusting flour everywhere. So I only add the flour when I need it, when I notice things are starting to stick. That way I'm not just adding flour unnecessarily. Now I'm going to use the bench scraper here. If you don't have one of these and you're looking for these are the Mustache Bench Scrapers by Doghouse Forge. We should have another release and drop coming right before the holidays, along with like the wooden gnocchi boards, which we'll talk about in a second. If not, by the new year, they should be available all of the time if you end up missing that drop. So here, with our dough, I like cutting it into manageable pieces, something around, let's call it sixths. So you go in half, and then thirds, and half, and then thirds. And now we have sixths. And the only reason we're doing this is so all of our serpentines are about the same length, right? It just helps with consistency. You could always just cut one little piece off if that's all you want to work with. So now I have my one piece of dough. I'm going to grab a little bit of flour now. And what I'm going to do is just using my hands, the top of my, bottom of my fingers, the top of my palms, we're going to press and roll our dough out on our work surface. And I like to think of this process almost like a reverse typewriter. And what I mean is like you're taking the dough from the center and working it out towards the ends. When you get to the ends, you're going to lift your hands up, bring them back to the middle, and then work your way out towards the sides again. Versus trying to work on one end and manipulate the dough all the way across. I find that's much harder than just being in the center and going out towards the sides. And then the length that we're going for here, the Italians call these snakes, they're called serpentines. Kind of see the word variation, how that all kind of comes full circle. So we have our serpentines here. I like to leave mine rather thick. That way you have these really plump, delicate, tender dumplings. Not necessarily something small. I kind of like them thick and large in this case, especially with the ragu that we're going with. So we're looking at something here that is about the width of my thumb. Maybe about, let's say that's about an inch. Yeah, maybe a little like inch and a quarter or so. And so now we have our snake rolled out. I like to just come down the row. And we will cut our snake into little 1-inch squares. So now we have these.
Nicole wants to know, so what was supposed to happen with the brown butter and the gnocchi?
The brown butter went into the gnocchi.
The brown butter went into
the brown butter went into the gnocchi.
Yes.
So we had in our mixer our brown butter, our cheese, our egg. Our cheese is our brown butter and our egg. All that's in the dough.
And then Paula says, Chef, have you used Hawaiian purple potatoes? Would that work the same?
I have not used, I don't know what a Hawaiian purple potato is. I've used purple potatoes. If it's a purple sweet potato, it could work the same in our food processor because there's not as much starch in sweet potatoes. If it's a purple russet style potato or like Yukon style potato, I wouldn't put it in the food processor because then you get really sticky and gummy from all that starch. So I've done it in the ricer, works really well, but I have only tried this yellow orange sweet potato in the food processor. And so it all just has to do with the amount of starch there so it doesn't get too starchy and too gummy. So now I have all these beautiful little dumpling squares. Beautiful, right? About 1 inch by 1 inch, lightly dusted with flour, just cut across with my bench scraper. And we'll do that one more time with one more serpentine, just in case anyone missed it. So looking over here, let's get this out of the way a little bit. Give us some room. Beautiful. So now with our dough, I'm going to come down, go a little bit of flour just to help. Not a lot, nothing crazy. And we're going to roll here, back and forth. Starting in the center, working my way out towards the ends with my hands. If you notice that this is sticking, don't be afraid to add a little flour on there. And then the opposite, if it's not sticking, if this is just kind of sliding on your countertop and not really rolling, you need to put a little bit of pressure on it. Pressing from the middle, moving the dough out to the ends. You're not just rolling it back and forth. That's not going to do anything. It does take a little bit of movement and pressure to kind of move the dough across. But you'll find your rhythm. It becomes very therapeutic at this point. Where we have your nice, about the width of my thumb, consistently all the way across there. And then maybe you have a lot of serpentines lined up, or you have a very long snake, and you're running out of room. What can you do? I always like you can cut it in half. Then you line up your two halves. You can cut your two halves again. Then you line up your four halves. See where I'm going with this? We'll go a little bit of flour on top, just so it doesn't stick. And then you can cut down the row, and every one of your cuts then are making the most of your time. And then you end up with a beautiful set of gnocchi pillows. Look at those. Now, before anyone asks, how do you make a very well-known gnocchi cup? That little like flick of the wrist that comes off of a fork. We could do a few of those. Usually it helps to have some flour on the gnocchi. You can have a little bit of flour on the fork. But it's as simple as finding that right bit of pressure. Not too hard or not too soft. What we're going to do is we're going to place the dumpling onto the fork, like so. Using our thumb, I have it all the way on the back end of the fork. Now keep in mind, that'll give us plenty of room for this to move across the fork. We're going to press onto the fork and roll, lifting the fork about halfway through. And we're going to let gravity do the rest of that magic for us. So then we have a nice little cup or hollow there in our gnocchi and the beautiful forking on the other side. Now this is totally extra credit. You don't have to go through and do this extra step. It's not really going to add anything per se, especially in a sweet potato gnocchi that's going to cook really nice and evenly all the way through. Sometimes with potato gnocchi, it definitely helps to do this forking if you find that they're really thick or the potato's not cooking evenly, in which case you will want to fork them just so they could cook nice and evenly. And then I also mentioned, they're very intricate style wooden boards. Like this one is one part of the Sasso Tool brand, all made out of purple heartwood. And this is that same thing. You have all these different patterns on here. You can roll your gnocchi on the pattern and get some really cool, interesting designs that'll hold in there when they cook. And these work well for like cavatelli, for gnocchi, for all different shapes and sizes of pasta. Pretty cool stuff, huh? So now, like I said, totally extra credit if you wanted to go that route. You wanted to fork all of your gnocchi. I'm not going to fork everything. I like the little dumplings, the pillows, if you will, like we have here in this case. But totally up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. I have my water boiling. What I'm going to do now is season up my water with salt. I always wait before I'm about to cook my pasta to season my water with salt for a couple of reasons. Salted water takes longer to come to a boil. And two, you can control the salt content much easier if you wait to add it till right before you're about to use it. If you try to season your water before, the water can evaporate, it can cook down, it'll get too salty, and obviously we don't want that. All right, done with this, done with this. Now we're gonna come in with our salt. The amount of salt that you add is gonna depend on how much water that you're cooking, how long the pasta's gonna be in there. Don't worry about a specific amount of salt. Think of it like this. You want your pasta water to taste good. It should taste seasoned, like a water soup. There's a little bit of salt in there. It tastes good. It's not plain. It's not salty like the sea. Seawater is way too salty. Instead, it should just taste delicious. And that's kind of where we're at. So let's make sure we're at a nice boil. We're going to dump all of our pasta in, and that's why I like to use a bench scraper for this. If you don't have a bench scraper, you can use a knife or something like that. Adding these into our water. And now these pasta gnocchi like this cook very fast. We're talking 2, maybe 4 minutes at the most. Usually once they float, we're very close to the end. I usually give them about 30 more seconds from the time they're floating. to the time that you want to pull them out of the water. So we can watch that happen in real time. While those are going, I'm going to start thinking about what I'm doing. Question?
Yes, a couple questions. Paula says, can you freeze the leftover? When are your chews going to be available?
Okay, yes, great question. Let me talk about that as we watch what's happening in the pot.
And then Carol says, how long will they hold before cooking?
Perfect. Okay, we'll cover both of those in a moment. Questions aside, what's happening here? Our gnocchi are cooking. We're thinking about now what's going to happen when they come out of the pan. I like to go into a separate vessel here. That way I can combine my ragu and my gnocchi together to finish them. That's where the mascarpone, where the parm, where the parsley, those last components and ingredients all come together in one happy matrimony and marriage known as pasta. So that's what I have this pan here for. We're going to watch because our gnocchi is just starting to float. Usually once they float, like I said, I give them another like 30 to 45 seconds. Once they're all floating, we can pull them, have them in this pan, and then we can pause for a moment. Talk about all of our questions, cover any of the bases, and then we'll finish the dish and bring everything together. I'm going to grab a couple of ladles of my ragu. And don't forget some of that liquid down in the bottom of the pan. That's going to help bring everything together. Gnocchi are boiling, they're bubbling, they're floating. Like I said, we're very close. If you're unsure, don't be afraid to taste one. You know, pull them out. Give them a little cut in half. Take a look at the center. What you're looking for in the center of your pasta is one homogeneous color all the way across. That way you know that it's cooked all the way through. If you cut into this and you see two different colors on the inside, it's not done. That's still some raw flour in there. But, ooh, so lovely. Sweet, savory, fluffy, melt in your mouth, tender, creamy, delicious. All the good things. All right, we're going to come out.
All of the good things.
I'm going to grab a little bit of this pasta water. That starchy pasta water is going to help bring our dish together. Now we can put this on pause. I'm going to grab, like I said, about a ladle, maybe about an ounce proportion of our starchy water. This is on pause. That's almost done. Now we can talk about the questions we had, right? Just so we're not leaving anybody behind. Give us a chance to catch up. Now, we have our dough here. If you made this dough in the morning, it'll last all day, kind of hanging out. You can turn them into gnocchi whenever you want. It doesn't really necessarily hold well overnight. That gluten from the flour starts to hydrate with all the liquid in there. It'll just kind of get very sticky. It'll get very stretchy, very gummy. A little difficult to work with. The alternative, what I would recommend you want to do, is that you make all of your little individual gnocchi and then cook them in the boiling water. Pull them out from the boiling water and just let them cool. Put them onto a tray, a cookie sheet, a plate. Maybe toss them with a little bit of oil just so they don't stick. But then once they're cooked, blanched, we're going to say, is now they're like ready to go. You could stick them into the fridge, you could put them into the freezer, and they're like almost in this like suspended state. Now you cannot freeze them without cooking them. When you go to try to cook them, they're just going to fall apart. They're going to get really mushy. And the reason being is this, they're not going to set in time in that water coming straight from the freezer. So I always recommend turn these all into gnocchi. Make yourself dinner or lunch or whatever it is that you're doing. Then when you go back to the kitchen to do a little cleanup action, blanch the rest of them in that same water before you clean everything up. That way then you have them ready to go. You can use them in leftovers. You can freeze them. You can microwave them. You can do whatever you want with them at that point. They're great sauteed in some brown butter, a little bit of sage. You can keep it super simple. You can fry them off in that same butter and put an egg on top. Call it breakfast. Or you could like bake them in like a Mornay sauce in a nice like baking dish and call it a side dish for whatever kind of main protein or entree that you're serving with that night. So tons of different options, all as long as you have these blanched in advance. If you do cut them into the gnocchi and maybe you're like waiting a couple of hours, I would stick them in the fridge on a flour lined tray or plate just to make sure they don't get sticky. I wouldn't necessarily leave them at room temperature forever because they might start to sweat. But the fridge should help firm them up and hold them in place. So I think that covers the questions. Oh, last question was the tools. So we're looking at right at the beginning of December, one more pre-release before the holidays, and that should include the wooden boards that hopefully then we'll have before the holidays coming out, pending, UPS, FedEx, all the crazy delays, but we usually do pretty good with that. And then after the new year, we're shooting to have them live on the website all the time. So if you're interested, thank you for your support. Love it. Did I see one more question? How will they hold before cooking? No, that was it. I think we covered them all. Cool. All right, now we're going to jump back to our pan. We're going to go back over the heat here. I'm going to bring this back up on high heat. We're going to swirl and emulsify, bring this together. We're going to cook down that starchy water, allow our sauce to tighten up. Once we see this just come to a simmer and it starts to thicken, I'm going to add my parsley and my mascarpone cheese. So mascarpone is like essentially a thickened heavy cream. You could think of it like that. It lets out very easily. I like it in a dish like this because it makes it nice and creamy in places where you would normally add butter, because butter has a specific flavor. This is like almost like turning this into penne alla vodka or chicken alfredo, like a lot of those like homey comfort dishes that have heavy cream. Heavy cream, I don't love that much adding to pasta, but mascarpone is a great solution, being able to add that creaminess without adding butter or without adding heavy cream. So that's where the mascarpone comes in here. Once you see that you get a nice little simmer going on, the dumplings are sucking up all of that ragu. Everybody's coating beautifully in the pan. Things are thickening up nicely. We're back at a simmer. Like I said, I'm going to come in with a nice scoop, 1 big tablespoon of our mascarpone, a nice sprinkling of our chopped parsley, and now just like butter, that mascarpone is going to melt. It's going to make our ragu, excuse me, make our ragu nice and creamy and rich. It's going to let it out just a touch. So now you have this really creamy, rich, unctuous. And the smells, my friends, let me tell you. Everyone should be coming to the kitchen now at this point. They're going to smell this. They're going to be like, when is dinner ready? Oh my God, what are you making? All very good things. As soon as we see that mascarpone start to emulsify and come together, I'm going to add a sprinkling of my grated parm here. That grated parm is going to add a little bit of saltiness, a little bit of nuttiness, help thicken our sauce one last moment right before we're about to plate. I always like to add my cheese right at the end, right before I'm about to serve it, so that way the cheese doesn't break, it doesn't separate. Oh, look at that, huh? Now we talking? We got some magic going on in this pan. So let's go a little sprinkling of our cheese. Well, all the cheese, why not, right? We'll give this a little toss. Let that cheese melt in there. Everybody become friends. Then we'll come in on our plate. Do this a little quick. Ooh, there we go. Now we have a nice little area for our plate to go down. We have all of our pasta. Now I'm just going to throw this out there. You don't have to do this, but it would be totally acceptable to eat this right out of the pan. You can do that. I'm going to throw it out there. It's totally fine if you want to do that. I approve. If you want to put it on the plate here, what I would recommend is for the marshmallow now. So I always like to marshmallow with a blowtorch. If you don't have a blowtorch, you can do this under the broiler, in which case you probably do want to do it still in your pan or an oven-safe baking dish. I wouldn't necessarily stick your plate under the broiler. It could get a little dangerous and a little hot. But as long as you have a blowtorch or a broiler or an oven-safe plate or the pan that you cooked all of the pasta in, you're going to be in business, right? So we're going to go now a couple of dollops of our marshmallow fluff. And these add such a nice addition. It's funny, I was serving this in Chicago just a week or two ago, and we're all laughing at how good it was, but everybody was giving me a hard time saying like, oh, what part of Italy do they put marshmallows on pasta? He's like, you know what? There are no rules. You can put marshmallows on pasta as long as food is delicious. That's all that matters. You know, don't let anyone tell you what to do or to feel bad about what you're doing. Be creative, follow your heart, have fun in the kitchen. That's what cooking and food is all about. And you know what? None of us know. Maybe there is a part of Italy where they melt marshmallows on top of pasta, and that's okay. And maybe we're channeling our inner ancestors that used to do that, right? So we have our pasta, marshmallows on top. We're gonna go a little blowtorch action. Oh, the plate is really hot. I'm gonna have to set that down. I thought I'd be able to hold it in my hand. I can't. It's gotta stay hot. So, quick torch on our marshmallows. You see all those immediately brulee. And you can put those as dark or as light as you like them. You know, depending on how you feel, how you eat your marshmallow and your s'mores. But oh man, look at that.
Oh, yeah, it smells so good.
We just made quite the treat. How about that, everyone?
I don't know about treat, dude. That looks like a full-on meal.
Yeah, quite the meal, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's get in here. Let's give this like a taste, right? Any final questions, thoughts, considerations, feelings? I'm very excited about this.
All right, let's go in for
Look
the bite.
at this meal. Oh,
Let's
baby. All right, quick bite. Get a little bit of everything, a little bit of marshmallow, a little bit of fluff, a little bit of pasta.
And y'all just made that in an hour and a half. What?
Stop. Oh. All of that together is layers. It's balance, it's complexity. It's so many different things going on at once. The marshmallow is spicy and acidic. It's fluffy and sweet. It cuts through the richness of the pasta. That ragu with the mascarpone and the pork and the turkey. So many layers of flavor, things happening in there. All the herbs and the thyme. Just really kind of like coats the palate. And then the dumplings, those little gnocchi. It's incredible how much flavor sweet potato has because all that sweetness comes through. They're tender, they light, they're just melt in your mouth.
Lexi Callie Jewel says, weren't we piping the fluff?
Lexi Callie Jewel, you missed me say, I was saving a piping bag and saving plastic today. And so I didn't put it in a piping bag and I said we're spooning it on top.
You can make it pretty though.
You can put it in a piping bag if you want. Like I did for the photos, of course. You can do that. And if you want to put it in a piping bag, I'm not going to judge you for using plastic. But I knew Bella would appreciate me for not using plastic today and just spooning it on with my fingers. So that's what I did.
Alternative plastic's also great too.
I need another. I don't have a reusable piping bag. So if you do, cheers.
Use those.
Use those. I need another bite of this. This is magical.
So magical.
Mmm.
Whoa, it's magic.
I want to kick the bookshelf or something right now. That is so good. I am energized. I'm energetic.
Same, dude.
I'm so happy about this dish. Honestly, it's one of I love it. It's one of the best recipes I have made in recent memory. I love it, and I'm so glad I got to share it with all of you today. So thank you for being here. I appreciate every single one of you. Really good times, right? If you have any other questions, anything comes up, shoot me a message on the Instagram at chef.joe.sasso. Use the taco emoji in the beginning sentence of your message. So that way, excuse me. Use the taco emoji so that way I can see it in the beginning part of the message. In which case, then I'll know that you were part of this class. The taco emoji is kind of like our little secret comunicado tool for the Instagram to kind of separate you from anyone else that may be sending me a direct message. That way I can take the time to make sure to answer it and pay my full attention to you because you're here and I appreciate all of your support. Thank you to Bella for helping in the chat room as always.
Thanks,
Shout out to all of you. And of course, like I said, you can find the hats on the website. And if you enjoyed this class, the next one coming up is a brunch class on Saturday. It's sponsored.
Not next Saturday.
No, it's on a Saturday.
Yeah.
December 4th.
Just wanted to
Yeah, not next Saturday. On a Saturday, December 4th, on Chef's Feed, sponsored by DeLonghi Espresso. We're making brunch. We're doing crepes and coffee, talking about coffee drinks, and sharing my mom's crepe recipe.
And the best part is free.
And it's free. So sign up. Just sign up. You don't even have to watch it now. You can watch it later. You can watch it in the new year. But sign up. You get the recipe. You get the live stream link. All the same things. And you just have to sign up. So share it with your friends.
Yeah, exactly. Send it to your friends and family.
Send it to everyone. Get everyone involved.
Visiting them on the holidays. You can You guys
could all have a crepe party on your own time.
Virtually.
Hosted by me.
Breakfast.
This is my invitation to you and your family and your loved ones. All to come make crepes with me. Together. So thank you, everyone.
And me, duh.
And of course, Bella will be
I'm the best part.
The best part.
Yeah.
The only reason we're all here anyway, right?
Obviously.
All right, everyone. Until next time, thank you. Don't forget, go out there, eat some pasta, make some love. Cheers, everyone.
Bye.